Greetings and salutations, guys. Eric here with my review of Deadpool and Wolverine, a film you might have heard a little bit about. Maybe you saw a couple little promos here and there. Um, this is going to be a non-spoiler review, but mileage varies on what non-spoiler even means. So let me just say up front, I will discuss things that have been in the trailers and commercials and promos for this movie and been discussed in interviews for this movie. So I think that's all, on the table because it's been put in the official promo materials and official talking points to people promoting the movie. So if you don't want to know anything, if you've done that thing where you've like not watched a single trailer, first of all, I commend you. I think that's kind of awesome when you can do that. But this is not the review for you. But I'm not going to give away anything else. I'm not going to give away any twists or actors that you haven't seen in the commercials that are in the movie. That is going to be kept for you to enjoy when you see the film. All right. But I'm going to discuss the basics of the story, the setup of the story, and we'll go from there. All right, if you're still with me, Deadpool and Wolverine, what an interesting movie because it is serving so many different masters, right? On one hand, it's Deadpool 3. It's the third movie in a popular franchise, except it's also the team up between Ryan Reynolds as Deadpool and Hugh Jackman as Wolverine. That's something people have wanted for a long time, so that's exciting, right? Except there's a whole other different level where now Marvel Studios is in control of Deadpool and Wolverine's characters, and that this signifies that. And there's the level of the fact that this is kind of the first Marvel Studios movie that is an X-Men movie or X-Men adjacent movie. We know they're working on something that's a little more full X-Men team, but still they're in the realm here. They're dealing with characters that come from the X-Men books. So all that, all that as we go into this movie, and the end result I think is a pretty damn entertaining movie. Um, is there anything tempered there? Yeah, I don't think this is like one of the very best MCU movies. And I know the hype level is so high that maybe some people want it to be one of the very best ones. I think it completely delivers, though, on what you want from a movie that is called Deadpool and Wolverine. I think it delivers a lot for people that are fans of superhero movies and fans of these characters and fans of the history of these characters. There are moments in this movie that made me so happy and also just kind of amazed at what I was seeing happen. Uh, the story, it starts out and it's Wade Wilson, Deadpool, a few years after the events of Deadpool 2, and he's not having a great time in life. He's kind of a little bit of a sad sack Wade. He and Vanessa are not together anymore, which is a bummer. And, he's trying to kind of get by, but then knock on his door, and it's the TVA from Loki. They are literally kind of bringing him in to the MCU, or at least elements of the MCU, telling him about a very specific issue going on, and that issue will lead him to be on the search for Wolverine, or a Wolverine at least, because this is not the Wolverine we knew in the previous movies, but it is another variant, an alternate reality version of Wolverine, still played by Hugh Jackman, and they have to work together whether they like it or not. And they will go on an adventure, and it'll bring them to some different realms and some different places, etc., etc. Deadpool and Wolverine is a very funny movie. There are times in this film that I was absolutely cracking up and, just kind of like shocked and very pleasantly surprised at the audacity of what they were joking about. There are in jokes to the movie itself, but then there are also corporate jokes, and then there's jokes about the celebrities and actors that are in the movie that sometimes go pretty far, and you might think that some of the actors wouldn't sign off on, but they did, and kudos to them. There are also jokes that don't land. There are definitely some lulls along the way, and you're kind of sitting for a couple minutes being like, this part's not that funny, and it's trying to be, and then something absolutely hysterical will happen. Ryan Reynolds, who again co-wrote this movie like he did the second one of 5 writers who all work together. He definitely, goes for it. There is nothing sacred in these movies, whether it be himself or his co-stars, or the genre they're working in, and you definitely have to commend him for that. It's hit or miss comedy, but it's one of those hit or miss comedies that is just hitting you so hard with jokes that if one doesn't work, don't worry, one's coming and it's going to work really well. We've got a couple different antagonistic forces in this movie. One is Emma Corrin has Cassandra Nova, a character from the comics, who has a connection to Professor Charles Xavier. I really thought Corrin was really cool here and really fun. A very sort of strange, offbeat energy they bring to this character. It's almost sort of like a bubbly delight in the vicious things they do. And kind of a relishing in it in a way that's not your typical like maniacal villain, but a little sort of quirky, little different take on it that I really appreciated. And then Matthew McFadden has Mr. Paradox, who's kind of our big representative of the TVA here, who has a lot to tell Deadpool, a lot of which Deadpool is not going to be happy with. And he brings a fun energy to the film as well. I don't think either character, though, gets as great a payoff as I would have liked. They're both set up well, and the actors are really bringing some really wonderful, distinct vibes to the whole thing. I think they could have done a little more with either of them or both of them by the end of the film. There's something a little lacking in some of the payoff. Comic book movies are often called out, especially Marvel movies, when they have weak villains, and I don't think either of these characters are weak per se. They both are interesting, but I think that they needed a little bit more in that third act to kind of pay off some of the things that are set up early on about them. I can't talk too much about the entire supporting cast because there are surprises. The trailers had given away a couple of people that return from the history of the X-Men movies, but there are other interesting actors playing interesting characters. And one thing I did like a lot is that I think the word cameo gets overused for just like a surprise actor, because to me a cameo is just kind of like a brief appearance, but some people in this movie show up and you're kind of shocked to see them, and then they stick around for a while. They're supporting characters in this movie, and I really like that. There's only one or two that I actually think would qualify as cameo, versus oh wow, that person's in the movie. They're doing a lot here, and some of the sort of combinations we get, it's just kind of amazing to see some of these people bounce off each other on screen. It was very delightful, I will say. I get it if you're just not into the superhero thing, or maybe you're just totally over it. But I think for those of us who have had a long time affection for these films, uh, it's very hard to resist this. It can't just be right. Like, hey, I know that person. That's cool. Um, but I do think what they do here is just kind of a very fun way to do it, a way to deliver things that I think are crowd pleasing. But you know what? I like to be pleased as part of the crowd. And I think that this movie knows exactly what it's doing. Again, there's a couple things it does that I'm like, maybe you didn't need to have that happen. Maybe that line was going a little too far. Not in a crossing a line as far as like, oh my God, that's a sacred cow, but just feeling like, maybe that's like being a little indulgent. But by and large, I think it's done in a very clever manner. And I think that there is a lot of thought put into how these appearances play out. And I really appreciated that. I would have liked to have seen the supporting actors from the first two Deadpool movies have larger roles. They're in the movie for the most part. A couple people aren't, but most of them are there. Um, but they don't have a lot of screen time. And there's a couple in particular, I think it would have been nice if they got more to do. That being said, one thing that I liked a lot about this movie is it still is Deadpool 3. It still pays respect to the fact that it is following in the footsteps of those two movies. And it doesn't just say, okay, Ryan Reynolds is still Deadpool, but now he's just off on this complete other tangent. It's saying this is the guy we saw in those movies. The things that happened to him, and they are important to him, and they have weight and consequences. Now he's having this crazy adventure and being brought to these new places, but we don't forget everything that happened, and it still feels like the third movie in this series. And your two lead actors, Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman, now look, they've both been playing these characters for a while. Hugh Jackman has especially been playing this character for a while. They know exactly what they're doing. They're both great, but they're also especially great bouncing off each other. And this movie is kind of a bickering buddy road movie a lot of the time, and I think it works really well on that level. If these guys who can't get along at all, but they have to work together, and sometimes they'll physically break out into a fight, and sometimes they'll argue with each other. Actually, they'll argue a lot, but they also have a little bit of respect, maybe, kind of, sort of. They do that very well, but they also can get a little deeper when need be. Now, Reynolds does that here and there, and I think the first Deadpool particularly, and the second as well, he got to show that, there is the depth there to that character, the character that obviously jokes, won't shut up, that is brought up in the movie, but that, there is something underneath there that maybe he's trying to mask. But Jackman in particular, I mean, we know he's a great actor, and he got to do such a wonderful performance in Logan, which gave him really a different way to portray that character. This movie is not Logan. It's not as great as Logan, and it is not as in depth as Logan, but he still has some moments here that remind you, oh yeah, this is the same guy. And there is one scene in particular where he really unleashes Wade, where Logan is kind of really particularly vicious to him. The things he says, not physically fighting him, where it's like, whoa, this is heavy, and look at how great Hugh Jackman is delivering this. Just how angry this character is. This is a very R-rated film, the first Marvel Studios movie to be rated R. There is tons of cursing. There is tons of violence and plenty of blood. It does stand out that while there are some very sexual things said, there's not actual sex scenes. I don't even remember Deadpool 2 having any as well, so really just the first Deadpool stands alone in that regard. I wonder if that will ever actually come back to this franchise. As for the action, this is a place where I wish the film were stronger. It's okay. I mean, what is happening is definitely kind of hugely over the top in that fun Deadpool manner. And there are moments that you're going to react to because it's like, holy crap, did he just do that to that person? And the way he did it, I don't think Sean Levy, the director, is the most dynamic director. He's fine. I wish he had more flair. I wish that, or that they got someone to direct this movie that had more flair, because there are moments where I felt like, wow, if someone who was like an action guy who could really sort of bring something to the table that really makes the action scene stand out was directing this, I think there are moments that would have been absolutely sort of transcendent on the action level. Instead of being like, well, that's a clever thing. Someone wrote that to be a clever moment. It's choreographed as far as like what is actually occurring to get a reaction, but I don't think there is a sort of directorial flair, directorial eye behind it that makes it pop in a way. I think it could. This is a movie filled with references to itself, references to the cinematic history and comic book history that came before, references to the corporations that have been running the show behind the scenes of these movies, and as I mentioned before, references to the personal lives of some of these actors. Uh, there is definitely plenty of jokes at the expense of 20th Century Fox and that former studio getting absorbed up by Disney. But there's also some affection there, and I really like that, as far as how this all came to be and the fact that there was this long run of superhero movies, of Marvel movies made by 20th Century Fox that gave us some great things, including Ryan Reynolds playing Deadpool and Hugh Jackman playing Wolverine. I have a lot of affection for many of those X-Men movies. I mean, in general, I have affection for the X-Men movies. I know that some of them were terrible, but I think that there was more good than bad, and I just have a lot of love for what those movies did and some of the choices they made, including these great casting choices that were made. And I think that the people behind this movie, Ryan Reynolds first and foremost, but everyone working with him, they wanted to pay sort of respect to that too here, and I really like that about the film. So you've got all these references, and you've got the fact that Marvel Studios made this movie, and that opens up so many more possibilities for them as far as the actors and characters and kind of the whole toy box of the MCU and what they can touch upon. And they use that for sure. I mean, the TVA first and foremost, but there are other elements in the MCU that are present in this movie. But I was surprised, and pleasantly so, that they don't go too far with it. I think that they still keep it focused on that this is a story about Wade Wilson and Logan working together, and that they don't get sort of lost in the MCU of it all. They have fun with it, but I think that they don't go into. I think that a lot of people might expect this movie to end in a different way than it does, or maybe set things up in a different way than it does. It is still telling what is ultimately a self-contained story more than anything. I mean, yeah, you could continue things from this film, but I don't think it is obsessed with like here's what's going to happen next, as some Marvel movies can be. I don't know. Maybe some people will be mad about that. Some people are going to be mad that they don't, directly lead into something that they want it to in a way they think it should. Like a lot of great MCU movies, it's like, hey, now we have this to play with too, and we can always kind of pull from that. But I think it exists as a Deadpool movie, and I like that a lot. So yeah, Deadpool and Wolverine, it's not perfect. There are definitely some moments where the energy lags a bit, and I wish it kind of like picked up the pace here and there. Wish the action scenes popped a little bit more, but there are also so many moments that I loved, and I can't deny that. I was just kind of thrilled to be watching these things happen. And when it is funny, it is so freaking funny. And it really is impressive to see them kind of go all in on this. The opportunity they were given here to keep doing these Deadpool movies, but now have this new sort of arena, how they can use that, how they can build out from that. And at the same time, have Hugh Jackman, 24 years in, play this character again and show that he still kicks ass at it. And yeah, I had some concerns when this was announced that as much as it would be fun to have Hugh Jackman back as Wolverine in this movie, would it kind of undercut what happened in Logan? I think that it doesn't. I mean, Logan just exists on its own, and no matter what, that is out there, and we can still enjoy that and cry to that movie. But you watch this and you think, well, this is pretty damn satisfying. There is a reason that Hugh Jackman has played Wolverine for 24 years. It is undeniably just one of those actor character combinations that just was meant to be. And I don't think he's the only one who can play Wolverine. And I think eventually someone else is going to play him and they can be great too. But he has now sort of set the bar, right? And that is going to be his signature character forever. And there's a reason he's just so damn good at it. And as he gets older, it works for the character. It doesn't feel like uncharacteristic to have this older Logan. In fact, it kind of works even better than when he was a sort of boyish younger version in the early movies. And yeah, it was great to have him back here in this movie. So yeah, I am looking forward to seeing Deadpool and Wolverine again. I want to see it. Hopefully, I hope I get to go see it opening weekend. It's Comic Cons. It's gonna be a little crazy for me, but I would love to see it with an appreciative audience of Comic Con attendees. So we'll see if I can do that, or I have to wait till next week. I'm very curious what everyone will think of it. I think it's gonna make a crap load of money uh, because yeah, it has everything you want, right? And again, not the very best the MCU has offered, but certainly offers so many things that I think people are ready for and are going to be very happy to see play out. So those are my non-spoiler thoughts on Deadpool and Wolverine. Went longer on this one than I expected to, but look, it's a big movie, okay? Um, as for the spoilers, I'm going to dive into all that with Matt Fowler on our podcast. We enjoy this weekend. We're going to have a bonus episode. If you're one of our Patreon subscribers, we're going to really dissect it all, talk about the things that I'm holding back from. So you should subscribe there if you haven't. It's fun. At this link. Ooh. And then I'll be at Comic Con this weekend. I'm going to have some articles out of that at my Substack, which you can follow here. Ooh. If you haven't done that. And I'm going to be very tired, but hopefully also be having a lot of fun at Comic Con. And I'll be back after that with more reviews right here at YouTube. Thanks, guys. Take care.